Hello friends, welcome to the Biology Forum. We come to the third part of this lecture series on the circulatory system. We have already discussed about the heart and the blood and lymph in detail. This lecture series will discuss about the blood vessels. So let's start. The major blood vessels in our body through which the blood flows in the process of circulation are the arteries, the veins, and the capillaries. So they are the channels through which blood flows in our body. Now, what are the differences between the arteries and the veins? The arteries carry blood from the heart and they carry oxygenated blood. They carry blood away from the heart and they carry oxygenated, that is pure blood. But you have to remember there is an exception to this, and that is the pulmonary artery. When we had discussed about the heart, you can remember that I had spoken about the pulmonary artery carrying deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs for oxygenation. So this is an exception in the arteries. Rest all of the arteries carry pure or oxygenated blood, and they carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood to the heart, that is in the direction of the heart, and they carry deoxygenated blood. Here the exception is pulmonary veins, which you remember they carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium. So the concept here is that they are, because the pulmonary artery is a blood vessel which is carrying blood away from the heart, even though it is carrying deoxygenated blood, it is called the pulmonary artery. Whereas the pulmonary veins are the vessels which carry blood towards the heart. So it fits with the concept of veins, hence it is called as the pulmonary vein, even though it carries oxygenated blood. Normally, they look bright red in color because they contain pure blood or carry pure blood. Veins appear dark red in color. The general color scheme that is used to show veins is blue, though the blood in it is not blue. It is quite dark in color because of the presence of carbon dioxide in it. So it is this dark red color through our skin appears a little greenish blue. So you remember the blood that flows in the veins is dark red in color. The arteries have thicker walls and a smaller lumen and the elastic walls that expand with the surge of blood. We have to remember that arteries are carrying blood from the heart, away from the heart towards the systemic circulation. You have to remember that the heart is pumping blood with a lot of pressure, so they need to have elastic walls to withstand this pressure, otherwise they can burst. Veins, on the other hand, because they are carrying blood towards the heart, do not have to face that kind of a pressure, so they have thin walls which are less elastic. No valves are present in the heart because the pressure from the heart is enough to drive the blood through these vessels. But yes, veins carry blood, especially from the lower half of the body, carry blood against gravity. So there's every chance that this column of blood can flow back. So there need to be valves which will allow blood to flow only in one direction and prevent the backflow of blood. So this helps for efficient venous drainage in our body. You can feel in the form of a pulse, that is the pressure with which the heart pumps the blood can be felt in the form of a wave, that is a pulse. So the blood flows in the arteries with great force and in jerks and spurts. Whereas in veins, because they're just draining it towards the heart, there are no pulsations. It is flowing in a very slow speed and there are no jerks. So if any time you have an injury to an artery, you can actually feel literally the spurts coming out from that major artery if it is injured. And you can see the blood flowing in spurts like a fountain, literally. This is every time that the heart beats, the blood will be flowing out. Always remember the arteries, because they are thick-walled, they cannot reach each and every cell in this condition. They split into smaller branches called as arterioles. These further split into fine branches which we call as capillaries, and these capillaries are very thin-walled vessels and they are able to reach each and every cell all around the body, and from there they will give the oxygen to the cells, collect the carbon dioxide, they'll rejoin to form finer vessels called venules, which will then rejoin to form a bigger vessel called the vein, which will ultimately drain into the inferior and the superior vena cava. Right. This is how the artery looks. If you take a cross section of the heart, the artery, you can see that the outermost covering is called the tunica externa. It is made up of elastic fibers and collagen fibers. The second layer from out is called the tunica media, the middle layer. It consists of elastic fibers, collagen fibers, and smooth muscles. Now, if you can really look at these two, they are quite thick layers, the tunica externa and even the tunica media. The inner lining is called the tunica intima, that is the innermost covering. It is made up of collagen fibers and smooth muscles, and the lumen, the aperture through which the blood is flowing in the artery, is quite narrow. Now, this is how the vein, a cross section of a vein, looks. The outer layer, that is tunica externa, is thin. If you can compare it with that of the artery, you can see that this is thinner as compared to the artery. So also the middle layer, the tunica media, which is a muscle and elastic fibers, that is also very thin, and it has the inner lining, the tunica intima, or the endothelial lining. If you can see, the lumen is quite wide as compared to the arteries. The capillaries, on the other hand, have just a single cell thickness. We call this as the endothelium. And the lumen is also very narrow. It is so small that it is enough to only let one red blood cell pass through at each time. But yes, the red blood cell can pass through this because of its shape, the biconcave shape. So this is how. So you can imagine how fine and how narrow the capillaries are, so that they can reach. And because it is just one cell thickness, exchange of gases becomes very easy across this capillary wall. So that is the advantage that we have because of the capillaries. So in comparison, if you see the artery, the middle layer is quite thick, it is quite elastic. Lumen is narrow. This is a comparison that you can actually see. Here you have the veins. If you can see, the middle layer is quite thin, and the lumen is quite wide, and there are presence of valves which are not seen here. Arteries are generally quite deeply placed in our body because they carry pure blood. They are quite important blood vessels, so they are placed deeply in our body, whereas veins are quite superficial. If you can see, artery forming finer, smaller branches called arterioles, which will further split into this capillary network. This will again join to form smaller vessels called venules. Many venules will then join to form the vein. At any given moment, about 30% of the blood in your systemic circulation will be found in arteries, 5% in the capillaries, and 65% in the veins. So the venous drainage contains more of the blood. Right. This is in general that you've had an overview of the blood vessels, or the channels through which blood passes. So in this lecture series, which was divided into 3 parts, we discussed about the heart. We talked about transportation, why it is needed. There are different types of hearts that are found in different organisms. Then we also spoke about the human heart, how it functions. We spoke of the cardiac cycle, disorders of circulation. We've spoken about the circulating fluid, that is the blood and the lymph, and how they are useful for us. And lastly, we spoke of the channels through which the blood and lymph is circulated, that is the arteries, veins, and capillaries, and the differences between them. Hope you found this lecture series very helpful. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much.